Welcome to Stepping Stones, L&D Career Journeys Explained, the podcast that shares the how of fellow L&Ders. I'm your host, Christina Rogers, and today I have Gemma Rupniak as my guest, all the way from the UK. I have to give a little applause. I don't have an audience here. I'm sorry. Gemma is the Technology Operations Manager at Jampan, where she leads a team of L&D administrator experts of learning platforms. So think of strategy, maintenance, optimization, outsourced solutions, implementation, redesign, and content curation to support client L&D teams. So from a young age, she's always had a keen interest in technology, and throughout her career, she's been passionate about optimizing processes along with creating and leading a successful team that shares such a passion. Her experience has consisted of industries such as IT, travel, and hospitality. So if you've been listening and watching this series as a newbie in the L&D world and have been trying to find your path, and maybe digging into the details of how systems click and diving into the behind the scenes of what exactly helps other roles in L&D to stay afloat and function. So, we create great experiences for our learners out there. Perhaps the path of learning management system admin, like Gemma, is one to seek out. So with that said, welcome, Gemma. So good to have you.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
So beautiful. And for those of you who don't know, because none of you do know, and I should have said that already, but Gemma and I have been trying very hard to make this happen. So I'm really thrilled that she's here. This is not an easy role to come by. And most people, I think, hit, unfortunately, I don't know, I almost feel like it's one of those like quote unquote glamorous, like, oh my gosh, you're an instructional designer. But you really miss out on really a big picture situation without somebody like Gemma. Okay. And I still find it quite glamorous in its own way, just because it is so critical to have with all the other moving parts within L&D. And it has its own beauty, I think, if you like numbers and data and inputting all of that information in such a way that it's really beneficial to support the team. But the really big thing is to see what is happening with the learners and the information that's needed to help them be successful in what they do and in the way of the clientele, right? That they have an understanding of what is actually being learned or not, and finding gaps and filling those gaps. And that doesn't take, 2 seconds to achieve. Much like I guess in some ways, and Gemma, you'll correct me here, but with instructional designers, we get teased, oh, you just make pretty PowerPoints. And I'm sure you have a version of that for what people think you do. So we'll dive into that in just a minute. So let's start with your story. So how did you learn about the existence of learning and development?
Yeah, so interesting question. I suppose ever since I was little, like my grandma always said, "Oh, you're gonna grow up and you're gonna be a teacher," and that kind of thing. And I was one of those weird kids that actually quite liked school. I really liked teachers and stuff. I was fully into it. So it was always kind of in the back of my mind that it might be something that I want to do. But when I was at college, kind of things worked out a bit differently from what I had planned, and I fell in love with the hospitality industry. And of course, I'm like 17 years old and I'm getting a paycheck. So I was like, who needs to go to university? So yeah, I pursued that career instead. But even, I was being like a team leader. So I was not kind of management, but helping, in a bit of a step up position. And one of the things that I got tasked with straight away was doing all the onboarding for new team members. And yeah, I love helping people. And like, I'm fully aware that I wasn't saving lives. I was like teaching people how much ice to put in a drink. But there was still that kind of really lovely element of helping someone and them feeling like they'd achieved something that they didn't know how to do before. So yeah, as basic as it sounds, I guess that's how it kind of started out.
Yeah, that would be learning and development there. None of us, I think, knew what that was, in our
Right.
younger days, just going, oh, I love that too. Teaching, it's great, but that's a fun way that you fell into it, even with the route of hospitality.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess with your journey,
Mhm.
how did you decide that you wanted to be a part of learning and development?
Yeah. So after I worked in hospitality for about 7 years, I kind of got up to like a general management position, and I guess fell out of love with it a little bit because like hats off to anyone in hospitality. Like, it is hard work. Like, most of my friendship group I met there, and some of them are still in it, and it's hard work. You have to love it. So yeah, I instead decided to go traveling and have a bit of a career break and kind of decide what was next for me, and I absolutely fell in love with travel and decided, if I'm going to come back and work for any big corporate company, I'm going to get a travel job. So I did that, and it was all going really well, and I loved it. And then COVID hit, and I got made redundant. And like I said before, I didn't go to university, so like so many people during COVID, I'm applying for jobs and I'm getting sifted out, by computer systems because other people have got high levels of qualifications than me, and it's just an easy swipe left. I don't remember which way you swipe to say no, but it was one of those situations. It wasn't the good one. Yeah, and then luckily, so my brother, he has his own business creating bespoke content. And so he had a network on LinkedIn, saw a job that got posted for an LMS admin. And he was like, look, why don't you just give it a go? And I was like, yes, like hard, yes. I've never done it before, but I'm so willing. Yeah, had an interview, got on with everyone really well, nice bunch, hired me. Yeah, and then just been working at it ever since.
Awesome. So I love your story with the fact that you fell into it this way. Again, I think for most of us, it's some kind of falling into L&D. It's different now with university certifications and degrees that are specific into it, but that hasn't always been the case. But I really love the fact that because you were willing to learn, that's how you were able to get in. And I just love that, I guess, almost an echo, right? So you're getting into it to help others learn, but essentially it's because of your own effort and willingness to learn that that opportunity opened up for you. So that's pretty cool. All right. So how did you learn about the role you do now? Um, I know that the job posting was there. You
Mhm.
saw it, you checked it out, you obviously went for it and everything. But was there any indication prior to that? Like, did your brother give you a heads up? Um, I don't know. Have you ever talked about what he did prior, maybe like when you were still in travel? Did you ever hear of anything like this kind of role?
Um, to be honest, no, especially not the admin side of things,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of attention. Sorry,
Oh, you're good.
there's a lot of attention on, like you say, kind of the designing and even kind of the consultancy and stuff around learning,
Yeah.
um, but far less so people like us who are kind of squirreling away in the background to make all the wheels keep turning, rather than being the people putting the engine in or painting the car or whatever analogy you want there. There's someone doing something in the background always.
Yeah.
I guess I really didn't know tons about it, and it was probably the first time I'd really paid an interest in what my brother did for a living. So I was like, can you maybe explain some of it before I go for this interview? So that was fun. Yeah, and I suppose the only exposure I'd really had was from working in big businesses before. So like corporates and being, plonked in front of a computer, either when you start or every
Yeah.
quarter or whatever to do some health and safety training and that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
not.
It's not, and that's why I'm glad you shared that because a lot of the reality, and I know this probably goes with other industries and other companies and whatnot, that a lot of times you just see what's up front and you don't realize really what's happening in the background. And in general, like, oh, it's critical, but you don't hear about it. And so you don't really know. And it's always fascinating what you do find out, behind the scenes of what positions there are and the areas of expertise within it. And so for those of you listening and watching and have not really heard of an LMS admin, I hope that this kind of shakes things up for you and not only gets you to see things as what we learned from Gemma, but also to be able to be mindful that there are more things far beyond what we typically see, I guess, on the front lines, if you will. Like if you don't find something that kind of suits you, but you want to be an L&D, maybe look beyond those to kind of see what other more specific roles that are like what you're saying, Gemma. I like that analogy with the, it keeps things turning, keeps the wheels going, right? Some of those front end jobs, yeah, they look pretty or whatever, but they really don't hold the weight that you think that they do. And it could be things that are actually taking place behind that are, like I said in your intro, keeping things afloat or just keep things moving along, that really the front end can only do so much, right? So without having someone like yourself, and I know that there's more specific, depending, of course, on the team and the company, but more specific, I'd say, with detailed, I guess, positions that support.
Yeah.
So, and I'll
for sure.
yeah.
I guess it depends on the size of the company as well, because some of the clients we work with, they'll have like one or two kind of admins. So we can support those couple. But they might be more in charge of things like making sure those rollouts happen with the compliance training and stuff. And they might not have time for, those little day jobs that like, you should do, but you put it off, and then you put it off a bit longer, and then, your content's been sat there for 2 years and no one's looked at it and stuff like that.
Yeah, that would not be good. So I'm going to derail a little bit here then. So with your LMS admin, I guess, what do you have on your team, or maybe you've seen with other teams, or maybe within your network? What other similar admin support roles have you come in contact with, like their titles, or maybe they do something more niche, compared to just the generic LMS? I don't know if that.
Yeah, so it's different, and companies have, depending on their kind of strategy with their learning as well, this kind of role would sometimes sit in HR as opposed to like a typical solo L&D kind of team. So the job titles vary so much from, something to do with people capabilities, someone or other, administrator or something like that. Or it could be technology and systems, or it could be people systems. That's quite a common one that I see now.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things like, I think job titles kind of in this industry, unless they're things like instructional designer, they can just get super vague, and you end up with a load of random words clumped together into a job title. Like even mine, like I'll poke fun at mine because technology operations manager, and I'm sat there like sometimes trying to join a Zoom call and it won't let me in, and I'm like, oh, I have to get on and say I'm a technology operations manager, and I can't even work. So yeah, they end up being clumps of just kind of weird and wonderful words. Like you hear digital a lot and things like that. I guess what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of red herrings, and there are a lot of job titles that you might not immediately think are relevant, but when you pull the thread a little bit, they'll soon unravel into the kind of work that I do and that kind of administration stuff.
That is very beautiful to know, by the way, that things are not so obvious, or maybe things get a little too creative on the word, title category. But that's a great thing for, I would say, the viewers to keep in mind, is if this is something that's kind of intriguing you, that, as you go searching to see such job opportunities, to actually look through the details of it and look at the job description because the titles aren't always, what they seem, and don't let them scare you, I would say, more than anything, because that's what I'm kind of listening with you, Gemma, just the interesting word choices that they pull. But ultimately, if you could just take the time to read through and get past that, you might see that there's a lot more familiarity or similarities in what they hold and what they're expecting someone to do in that role.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
that's very good to be smart about, I should say. So with that, what exactly does an LMS admin do? What do you do, Gemma?
Okay, I'll try not to ramble on for too long. The short version is tons. But yes, so to be more specific, my team, I kind of divide up into a few different elements. And so curation is a massive thing. I could talk to you all day about it because obviously, like we've said, you get these great people who are designing great courses, and then they get into the organization and get lost in a sea of other great courses and also maybe some not so great courses. And by the time a user's found a really good one, they have lost half their motivation to do anything with it. So I think curation is so important. It's also like a massive sort of time and therefore money saving exercise to do curation well, because there are so many great things that are off the shelf as well that maybe just need a bit of contextualizing, and then they're far more applicable and will resonate much better with learners. So there's the curation side, which I'd say is where I get to be kind of one of the most creative. When you just feel like you can get lost in spreadsheets and things and you just want to do something that's a bit more creative, that's where I get my fill with that. Similarly, so on the creative side, we do kind of redesign work, which is where, so a client might have an LMS and they might think that it sort of isn't as aesthetically pleasing as they'd like, or maybe isn't as customizable as they'd like. Some LMSs you can go as far as putting your logo into it and that's about it, or like giving it a different name. So yeah, we do work in that space as well. So we can use kind of clever technology to put like a skin over it and hide it, but also give people more functionality. So that's really fun, really creative.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, that's a really nice feature. I like that capability that you guys now have to do things like that, just because we're
Again,
we
oh
get a little
sorry.
crazy with our designs. I think on the front end we're like, oh, it needs to be like this across everything to give that amazing experience for the learner. So I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can also kind of help with functionality. So like if you've got a system that doesn't do something that you'd like it to do, we get inventive. So that's fun as well. That's a nice kind of muscle to
Oh
flex
yeah. Oh,
instead
that's
of it being in the spreadsheets. Some people will love a spreadsheet. They'll sit in there all day, but I am not that person. Yeah.
well, that's good to know.
Other ways to kind of mix things up, I suppose. We do a lot of kind of data analyst role based things. So a lot of the time the client will want to be the one who's sitting there and kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, but it's a lot easier for them if someone gives them the puzzle pieces, right? So like we'll just make a lot of reports. So for some clients, we'll be the ones doing the kind of analysing of the data as well. But a lot of the time, it's just supporting people to kind of self-serve and get the information they want, because it's the worst thing in the world when you invest all this money in an LMS and all this compliance training, and then you can't prove that you're compliant.
Yes,
So, I mean,
I agree
it's
with that.
yeah, can't overlook how important that is, even though it's not necessarily the most fun part of the job.
Right.
But when you get to give a client this like suite of reports and dashboards and things that's all there and waiting for them, it's yeah, it's pretty rewarding. It's good.
Yeah, I would say for my perspective, now I am no LMS admin, but um I would think that it is pretty rewarding getting the information and I guess analyzing to some degree, or at least making it available, and even seeing the patterns yourself and the statistics that might, start revealing itself in that data
Yeah.
to go, all right, you're a client here, but there's a knowledge gap over here. And it's I think it's an interesting way to start seeing. I mean, I don't like to say problems in the way of like, oh my gosh, it's the worst thing ever, but it's just fascinating just to see what comes about and then learn to go, okay, what can we do to change things up? So that way we get the people in to accomplish what they need to be accomplishing or learning what they need to be learning. So that's kind of neat. I have a question just out of curiosity now. You mentioned about curation. Now, when it comes to, I mean, it's one thing collecting all of that and putting it in and, refining it and everything like you were mentioning, but I hope this isn't a long shot in asking, but do you guys help as well? I don't know if this is in your niche or if maybe I'm stepping on a different role here, but when it comes to helping create an algorithm or a pathway to help the learner navigate through what is being curated so they can take things according to what they're trying to accomplish, either in their career growth and things of that nature. Do you guys do that?
Yeah. So we work with LXPs as well, so learning experience platforms, whose kind of main aim is to look at skills and upskilling. So we do a lot of work around kind of benchmarking where learners are at before they do any of the learning. And then again, after they've kind of consumed all that curated content. So it's a really nice way as well to kind of supplement your compliance type learning as well. But also it's completely separate in some ways. But like it's great to curate around your compliance learning just to contextualize it and to try and get like a bit more motivation from the learners. Like, why am I doing this? It's not just because you're being told to. Like, there's a reason.
Yeah, there's
yeah.
Sorry, learners. There are reasons why you're having to take what you're taking.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, for the skills stuff, I mean, that's more that's something to get really easily enthusiastic about. I mean, there are so many reasons why people should upskill, and it's brought to me so many different kind of I guess concepts, or just hearing all different clients kind of taxonomies of skills as well is really interesting, like how people will put some, in some job roles and some in others. Like it's all really interesting. And then I obviously at the same time as curating things get to, upskill myself along the journey because I'm reading it. So that's really
awesome. All right. So we've touched on some things that I didn't mean to get on such a fascinating trail with you there, but it is really intriguing, the whole thing. And I think when you don't understand or know of that existence, I mean, it's pretty cool to find out. So with this, I need to ask, is there something, it almost sounded like we were borderline because you get very passionate. I love that. But is there something like within this role as you dug in and you were doing what, was required of the job and everything that made you go, I love this. I want to keep doing this?
Yeah, I think it would, if I had to sum it up as like one thing, it's that conversation you have with a client when you just see like a weight get lifted and they're like, oh, this is amazing. Like, thank you. Like, just grateful because they've been trying to do something and they haven't been able to do it. And it comes in a lot of forms in what I do. Like it's not so much, it's probably least the curation-y stuff we were talking about because we're asking for it and they get it. And yeah, like we wow them, but it is what it is. What I prefer is when there are issues or there are gaps or there are frustrations, because at the end of the day, like what we're working with is technology. So I mean, who hasn't been frustrated by technology at some point? So it's just so nice to be able to say, do you know what? Yeah, we can fix this. Don't worry. And having to be creative, coming up with solutions and like workarounds. I really enjoy that as well. You get to be kind of creative, but also like it's computer based, so it's kind of
Yeah.
super logical at the same time, and seeing those things come together, it just, that excites me. It's really good.
That's
Yeah,
fun. That
one
is
thing.
fun. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect. Because I can just see or hear somebody just watching, tuning in and being like, oh my gosh, yeah, I like that. Analyzing, analytical, the logistics, being more logical in my thinking. And there's always that creativity piece with just how do you solve this? Right. So if my mechanism or my LMS has these capabilities, what can I do to adjust and tweak in order to get what they're wanting and they're needing, and understanding why. I always love the why behind it, and what is it that they're needing to do this for the learners. And once you get all that and then just sitting there and playing with it.
Yeah.
All right, if you're hearing this and you're getting excited, this is the role for you. I'm just going to say that. Very simple. So with that, I guess let me ask this. As you look at your journey and maybe think back to, I know the journey wasn't a very straight shot, but if someone were to have given you advice back then, or if you want to reach out to someone in the audience who's watching, listening in, who has a similar passion or look or feel or similar path, background even, what would you advise them? Like tools and resources, books, networking, like, was there anything that kind of boosted you as you were already diving in that just helped you get stronger or get even more passionate about what you do?
Um, yeah, so I guess in terms of resources, there was a book that got recommended to me, which was like a really nice, I'd say introduction to L&D, but that would
Yeah.
completely actually missell what the book is. But for me, it was because it kind of taught me the why behind all of these people in this industry were doing the things that they were doing. And when it's an industry you knew nothing about beforehand, that is really useful. So even though the book isn't like a this is what L&D is or this is why we do the things we do, it was more like teaching. So the book is called Design for the Way People Learn, something like that. I can't remember the author's name. Julie, someone. I'll have to get back to you, but it's an amazing book. And it was really good because, it touches on kind of motivation, obviously why we design things, but also far more about like how people actually learn. And, things like, I remember one of the things I read that was like a, penny drop or like light bulb moment was this whole thing about how you can recall information that you've learned much better if you're in a similar setting when you learned it as to when you're trying to remember it. So at the time, for me, that was like, oh, that's amazing. And I started like unpicking everything I'd ever done and been like, oh, I could remember that really easily. But then when I got taught that, I couldn't remember that. And then I was thinking about like any exam I did as a kid. And I was like, oh, when they put us in the sports hall, like I struggled more. Like, is that because I wasn't in the classroom? I learned it. When someone says something and you just start thinking about every life choice you've made up until that point, and it all like, yeah, I don't know. That's probably a ridiculously obvious thing to say in front of people who might be watching this, but it was just a really good book, and there were so many things that resonated with me, even if I didn't feel like I belonged to that like an L&D community. And it was just a really, really interesting thing. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's really good to have such a resource like that. And I think for all of us in L&D, it's like once you make that transition and you understand and you learn things like that, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so super obvious. And it's a little embarrassing because you can easily look at the rest of your life and just see where the learning took place and where it was stronger and why it was stronger and how it was stronger. It's nice to have somebody who can articulate that.
Yeah.
So we can go, oh, okay. Even though I think all of us kind of knew that all along,
Yeah.
but I find that really funny because I get books like that too. Like Kathy Moore's Map It. I would just like, thank you for articulating this. I was like, I think I kind of knew this and I was already doing this, but just to have it written down is very nice.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
glad you
100%.
had that good resource. Um, and any others that come to mind or
I can't think of any other particular resources that I
okay,
used, but I
okay.
think when you started out the question, it got me thinking about like what you'd say to someone who wanted to do
Oh
the job that
yeah.
I do. And I think the big thing for me there was like I would just encourage people to just get stuck in. I think that's really the best way.
Yeah.
With all these kind of technologies and software as a service, like you always get like a sandbox environment where you can just
Yeah.
go wild, you can do what you want, you're not going to cause any harm, and that's genuinely the best way of learning it.
I love that.
I think when you try and read all about these kind of processes and things, it can be so abstract, you know, like I remember learning about how this particular LMS could solve the issue of like logging on the job training and how you'd kind of do checklists or whatever to tick off that someone could use a piece of machinery or something. And I just remember reading it and I read it, you know, like 3 times and I was like, this still means absolutely nothing to me. Like it's here, it's in English, like I shouldn't be struggling, but it's just not, you
Right.
know. So yeah, I think you just have to get in, get your hands dirty, get stuck in, and it'll all make
That's
sense.
that's beautiful advice. I like that. I think many times that tends to be the best way to go.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I can see that. Well, Gemma, last question for you. For those who are watching and listening in who are like, oh my gosh, I have to go follow this. Where is she? What is she doing these days? Where can they connect with you on the socials or LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure. So I think I'm pretty fortunate in that there aren't a lot of Gemma Rupniaks in the world. So if you pop that in, you will definitely find me.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to call it that's a wrap. That's beautiful information. Gemma, thank you so very much. Seriously, I really greatly appreciate your time and sharing all of your experiences with us and really putting a name to what that is behind the scenes and just keeping in mind that there's a lot going on and there's so much more to L&D than just those basic frontline roles, if you will. I mean, not easy, but totally worth it. And I just love how you're passionate about it. So I really hope that this connected with someone out there. So if you're having that feeling like Gemma and you're like, oh, I love the analyzing and the data and putting this and helping to problem solve and really push to support the L&D teams that are out there, I think this is the way to go. So definitely check out the resources that Gemma mentioned. And if you get the chance, don't hesitate to connect with her. So, to all my listeners and viewers, thank you so much for today. And remember to continue stepping onward. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.